Before I start on the nuance of wishing Palestine Merry Christmas despite being Jewish and not being an actual celebrator of Christmas, I'd like to get into the nuance of the Jewish Palestinian before getting into the nuance of the Christian Palestinian. By this effort, any Christians, or even, hopefully maybe if they can see it, Christian Palestinians, any of them who see this, will see that my solidarity is sincere. What you're about to see took place in the Jewish Palestinian neighborhood of Shearim on November 2023. And yes, Shearim is Palestinian. It completely predates the state of Israel. When the people who settled Shearim came to Palestine, they were immediately embraced by the Palestinians. In fact, they asked permission to build a neighborhood, and they were given permission instantly. And whether you believe it or not, there's a very strong shared DNA between Palestinians and the Ashkenazim. It's just a fact, although Sim's books won't admit that. Genuine Jewish solidarity for Palestine very rarely comes from anyone secular. It's just the sad truth of it. And that gets into another thing. Lack of observance is not the same thing as being secular. Now, I'm not against the notion of secular institutions, and I think I've made that very clear, that secular institutions are necessary. But secularism is an ideological danger. It's the same thing, it's literally the same thing as capitalism. Capitalism and secularism are the same thing. The only difference is capitalism is what we say when we mean it economically, and secularism is what we say when we mean it culturally. I would go further and say that, and I have gone further, and these ideas, by the way, don't originate from me. But I would also go further and say, yes, in the cultural context, spirituality. In other words, fascism is the economic term that we apply to the cultural term known as spirituality. Spirituality is fascism, fascism is spirituality. Capitalism is secularism, and secularism is capitalism, and they're both basically the evolved versions, the two different alternative evolved versions of colonialism. This logic that I'm presenting does not come from the falseness of linear periodization. Time is something that is measured from several different points of view. It is not invalid, but it is, in fact, perspective, and perspective matters. And I don't have time to get into the sciences. Like, I've publicly stated that I don't exactly believe in science, and here's the irony. Despite my lack of belief in science, I understand science better than the people claiming to believe in science. This gets into another thing. My lack of belief in science doesn't change the validity of science. Belief refers to faith. Belief refers to my trust in. I don't trust in science. I trust in magic. I've always been this way. I think that that's the big con of our age, is people have been tricked into thinking that sorcery is closer to magic when it's closer to science. Anyway. I am procrastinating the point, and I apologize. I didn't mean to derail like that, but anyway, this video, it came out on November 2023, and there will be a link in the description for you to view it.
רוצה ללכת לשם, אני לא מבין, מותר ללכת לשם. חבר'ה, רוצה ללכת לשם. אני לא מבין, אתם מביצים לי. איך הוא? שם, תן לי אותו. חבר'ה, תבוא תבוא. אני לא אומר בצמזים. בוא, נתן לי הולך, תתבוד את זה. תצלם אותו, תצלם אותו. יש שם עבודות. שם יש עבודות, אתה לא הולך, עכשיו אתה עומד פה.
יונתן ניסים.
אתה מנסה בכוח. מה יעצור אותך שאתה הולך?
בוא נראה שוב עכשיו.
מחבלים! מחבלים מכאן! מחבלים!
המספיקים! מחבלים! איפה הכניסו נוער? ניקח אתכם! מחבלים! תלכו לעזה! מחבלים! מחבלים!
חייבים להוריד את זה, אין מצב, אין מצב, חייבים להוריד את זה.
רוצחים!
Right, that's good.
רוצחים!
Sie gehen auch gehen auf der andere, sie gehen auf feste Video. Sie gehen auch gehen auf der andere.
כל המילים!
זה הגיע, הכניסה הקרקעית הגיעה.
גוססים!
אל תפריע. שומע? אני מזהיר אותך פעם ראשונה, אל תפריע. אל תפריע. אל תפריע.
הוא עיתונאי, אל תיגע בו.
שמעת מה אני אומר לך?
מה נפלת עליי?
אל תפריע.
איפה הפרעתי? הוא ביקש שאני אצא.
אל תפריע.
לא?
תפסיק להציק לי. אני עם כולם, תפסיק להציק לי.
תראה לו תעודת עיתונאי וזהו.
מה עשית? אתה שם מפריע!
אתה פעם ראשונה עונה לי לעזוב. אתה פעם ראשונה עונה לי לעזוב.
פעם עשירית אמרתי לך! תיכנס לפנים!
זה פעם ראשונה.
אולי מצלם טוב, שני גמור. כמעט. Nicht auf dem Trepplober. זרוק, זרוק.
מחבלים!
הייתם בדרום 5 שעות. ב100 שערים אתם פה על הדקה. ממשיכים מורשתו של היטלר.
נכדים של היטלר.
There's been some confusion, I think, at times when people refer to me. Like, obviously, I am Jewish, but people get confused. They're like, are you pro-Muslim or are you pro-Christian? And the answer is, I'm pan-Abrahamic. I'm not pro-Christian or pro-Muslim. I'm pan-Abrahamic. I recognize Muslims and Christians as children of Abraham. There are a lot of people who get upset when I say that, though, because they're like, how can you include the Christians? Except that they don't understand that, who do you think the children of Esau have always been? The children of Ishmael are the Muslims, the children of Jacob are the Jews and the Samaritans, and the children of Esau are the Christians. This is a no-brainer. And I'm not going to get into the validity of these religions and or the lack thereof. That's not the point. The point is this. if you can't make a differentiation with the very not monolithic group, like out of all religious groups, the most not monolithic is definitely the Christians. And at the same time, and this is controversial to say, but there is authentic Christianity and illegitimate Christianity. The more Western the version of Christianity, the more illegitimate. That's just the truth. Because Christianity began from Oriental origins, just like Judaism did. Western civilization itself is an innovation, which is around 2,000 years old, and it has led to nothing but disaster. We think that, oh, well, we've achieved human rights, you know, but we just called that, like, there was no human rights in antiquity. That's true. But the notion behind human rights did exist in antiquity. This notion that the ancients were terrible, selfish, exploitative individuals and that we today are somehow better is not true. This linear periodization is a lie. And if you want to talk about what's good for humanity and the environment, then civil society must exist without the state. That's going to happen. But in order to save civil society, you have to be able to put civil society in its place. Therefore, it can never trump tribal society, and tribal society should be allowed in certain situations to trump civilization. Let me say that again. There's civil society and there's tribal society. And civil society should never have any jurisdiction over tribal society. And tribal society should, in certain situations and in certain jurisdictions, have power and the ability to veto civil society. And hunter-gatherer societies should be allowed to veto, block off any tribal society or civil society. Now, before anybody accuses me of primitivism, no, this is part of decolonization. Because whether you like it or not, there is no human necessity to have civilization. Is civilization a necessity? Yes, but so is tribal society, and necessities can contradict themselves. I'll give you a great example of this right now. Prostitution is 100% exploitation. Pornography is 100% exploitation. However, erotic art is not exploitation, and promiscuous, or perhaps more correctly, casual sex, I think that would be the more correct way to say it, I suppose, is not the same thing as prostitution. But prostitution is definitely exploitation. There's no way around that. Now, some people argue that it's not exploitation because sex is a need. And that's true. Sex is a biological need. However, there could be just as much a need from another person to say, no, I'm not going to have sex no matter how much you need it. That is also right. Now, take a guess which necessity vetoes the other. The answer is the one refusing sex. The lack of all this nuance is a problem, and one of the major issues we have is we think that good and evil is not material. But that's also because we have idealistic notions of good and evil. Good is literally empathy in motion. Material empathy in motion. That's what good ultimately is. And evil is material apathy in motion. And these two do not exist on a binary. They do not exist on a pendulum against each other. They are technically opposites, but they're only opposites because they act opposite of each other. The fact is they do not have a neutrality between them. They don't have an even ground between them. And they don't exist on a binary. And here's another thing. If you attempt to label everything good and evil, that is an evil action. So this gets into another thing. Most things have nothing to do with good and evil. And unlike emotion, good and evil can be materially observed. Like I said, material apathy in motion, material empathy in motion. This is actually what good and evil has always referred to. So, I mean, I understand that this strips away a lot of Christian idealism, but that's not really a concern I have. And yet, this video is a Merry Christmas to Palestine. Because they are going through not just genocide in Palestine, but like now in Syria too. You'll notice, like, I'll never forget how Trump congratulated Erdogan for coupping Syria, which he did. It was particularly the Turkish who took over Syria. Yes, the same genocidal Turkish, the same regime that exists all the way back to 1914 that committed genocide against the Armenians, still exists, still is fascist. But people don't want to believe it's fascist because it's secular. They don't realize that fascism is secular. Secular, it doesn't mean good, ethical, or wholesome, people. I'm sorry, but it refers to non-necessities, such as entertainment. There's civic, monastic, and secular. And by the way, monastic includes gender identity, sexual orientation, because it's sacred. So not everything monastic is about religiosity. And until we can correctly identify these and drop our stupid, basically hedonist, atheist, agnostic idealisms and Christian Western idealisms and just look at being a seeker of whatever the truth is to ascertain the truth, we're going to be in trouble. And the truth is, for Palestine, Palestine is Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. It really is. It's also Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, and Samaritan. Eventually, the Druze are going to have to be reminded that they're not Israeli. They are Palestinian. In fact, there's no such thing as Israeli. Those are these Hebrews who call themselves Israeli are a group that exist as a quagmire, as a terrible political quagmire. They are not a culture. They are not a nation. They are a colonial get-together. The ultimate proof comes in the fact that the state of Israel without the state would rip itself apart because there's nothing uniting their civil society, whereas Palestine is united exclusively through its civil society, despite the lack of a state. This is because the base is the civil society and the superstructure is the state. Again, the base is the civil society and the superstructure is the state. And whether people like it or not, tribal society must always be allowed to veto civil society when threatened by civil society. Civil society should never, on any circumstances, be allowed to veto tribal society. Ever. The danger of civil society is that it's eugenics, but just in reverse a lot of the time. It's wrong to cut off people from medicine. It's wrong to do that, but it's also wrong to preserve medicine if there's a democratic will to die. And I'm not talking about genocide or euthanasia on a mass level. I'm not saying that. Before anybody twists what I'm saying, I'm talking about the fact that societies believe often that their merit to continue is based on their ethics, and if they fail those ethics, then they're meant to fade out. And this is a problem collectively with a melting pot of assimilated civil society, which doesn't know the difference between civil society and the state. This decaying civilization that I speak of is existing at the expense of hunter-gatherers and tribal society and the environment. To save civil society, there has to be a lot of redefinition of things, because as we define things is controlled by Western academia. And that's why all decent academics are persecuted one way or another. You see this with Chomsky and Finkelstein. They've both been persecuted unfairly. Of course, they both still remain, and that's largely because they're a bit corrupted. Dr. Weisfeld, you could say that he's corrupted in some ways, but the truth is, when it comes down to the ultimate actions, Dr. Weisfeld is completely clean. He's spotless. Therefore, he's boycotted and censored. That's how the world works. And I know this is not a video discussing the failures of Dr. Weisfeld's own idealisms that we've constantly caught him doing, and where he undermines himself, and I will go into that stuff again, but to do that, I'm going to have to make sure that I explain the full nuance, make sure that there's also affirmations, because it's not about tearing the man down. And I'll have to do the same about myself. There's a lot of self-criticism I'm writing out. But anyway, I don't say Merry Christmas unless it's directed to Palestine, the origin of Christmas. So from my pan-Abrahamic Jewish heart, Merry Christmas, Palestine. I will turn this over to a video that came out on December 23rd of this year of 2025. From Middle East Eye.
And so Benjamin Netanyahu stood up in the United Nations a few weeks ago and said that Israel is the only country in the Middle East which protects Christians. and now you just telling me that your life is being made a total misery by the Israeli state.
That's a bypass road. It's what Israelis call a bypass road because you bypass Palestinians. You don't have to see them. Loss of land is not only the loss of livelihoods. It's really it's the destruction of your future presence in your ancestral land as an indigenous person.
Benjamin Netanyahu recently boasted that Israel is the guardian of Christianity in the Middle East. To test this claim, I travelled to Bethlehem to learn how Palestinians are surviving this Christmas in the birthplace of Christ. What I found, not only the town of Bethlehem, but the villages which surround it are being devoured by Israeli settlements. Access to nearby Jerusalem has been blocked for the first time ever by the military occupation. I met Dalia Kumsia, a local human rights lawyer. She took me to the Kremisan and Al-Makrour valleys in the west of Bethlehem, two sites with deep Christian roots that hold a special place for Palestinian Christians in the region. Kumsia explained to me how Israeli plans to connect illegal settlements in the area may cut off Palestinians from entering these sites, which have historically been owned by Christian Palestinian families. And she warns me that the illegal and brutal Israeli occupation now threatens the very survival of a Christian community in Bethlehem. Kumsia told me that Palestinians under the Israeli occupation are being driven out for being the wrong sort of Christian.
So let's just sum up. So here we are. We're looking across the
Gilo settlement.
The Gilo settlement.
Mm-hmm.
The valley in between was Palestinian land. Now it's being more and more annexed and cut off from you, and you're not going to be allowed access. Suddenly this land isn't yours. And so your sort of freedom to breathe, as it were, in your ancient communities has been taken away. Meanwhile, the spiritual basis of your life, going to Jerusalem in order to celebrate these ancient festivals, Easter, Christmas, is being taken away from you by military bureaucracy. And what is that gate doing?
It's installed by the Israeli military in preparation for annexing the valley, severing our connection to the main street, to this valley. So here you are overlooking the Kremizan Valley.
Yeah.
All of this is the Gilo settlement.
And on the brow of the hill across,
yes, it's a massive settlement, and we can see every time we come here that it's crawling down, it's expanding. This was, of course, part of Beit Jala traditionally, and it is said that the stones that were used to build the Nativity Church were taken from the quarries of this area. It's called a Slayib. It's known for its excellent stone quarries. And now it's become a settlement, a Jewish Israeli settlement, built on basically the lands of Beit Jala. Here is the Gilo settlement, and on the top of that hill you can see some structures. That's the Har Gilo settlement. Har meaning mountain. So if you look at the symbolism behind the names, like this is Gilo but this is Har Gilo, in the Israeli logic these should be connected. And how do they do that? Through annexing the Kremizan Valley. And the connection of Palestinians to the last green and open space area has been severed. The connection of the people to their land has been severed. For what purpose? For the purpose of annexing two settlements together, the Gilo and the Har Gilo. The lands in between are privately owned land by Palestinian Christian families mainly. The documentation we have from a few years ago, when this case was ongoing in Israeli courts, says that there are 58 Palestinian Christian families that are about to lose their lands because of the annexation law. And what does this do when you lose your land? As a Palestinian, of course, not only as a Palestinian Christian, it severs your connection to the past, because this is the land you've usually inherited from your ancestors. You can see that the plans for these areas is annexation. If you look at the pattern of where the settlements are expanding and new settlements are being established in this area, you can see that at least for the Israeli plans, it is slated for annexation. If you also look at the bigger picture, like what's being passed at the level of the Israeli Knesset, for example, the Jerusalem and its daughters bill, which is basically means Jerusalem, its daughters are the settlements. Part of them are in these areas. It means that the settlements should be connected to Jerusalem. So you can see the threats that are encircling these areas are very real, they're very serious. Threats are imminent of annexation. On the ground, the situation is deteriorating. The settlers are definitely one tool of ensuring land control and forcible displacement of the Palestinians in the area. So the overall picture is very grim.
So what you're saying is that they are creating a greater Jerusalem, which takes in it Bethlehem.
This explains why annexation policies are intensified in the Bethlehem area. In the Israeli logic, the strategic location of Bethlehem, its great proximity to Jerusalem on the one hand, and the Israeli ideology that considers Bethlehem and perceives it as part of a greater Jerusalem, make it under, aggravated threats of being annexed. For the first time in history, Bethlehem was geographically severed from Jerusalem. And we have to give this highlight what this means for the Christian faith. Bethlehem represents nativity, one pillar of our faith.
It's where Christ was born.
Exactly. And then Jerusalem is where the resurrection happened. So these are the two pillars of the Christian faith, and Israel for the first time physically separated them. What this means for Palestinian Christians like myself, if I want to go and celebrate Easter in Jerusalem, and that never happened. Jerusalem is here, I live in Bethlehem, it's very close to me supposedly. But Israel implemented these administrative barriers and physical barriers. It means it made access to Jerusalem. The norm is access to Jerusalem for millions of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza is prohibited. The exception is, yes, you can go in during specific occasions if you get a permit from the Israeli military, and if you do that, you can go through designated checkpoints only. There are damages that we can measure from the Israeli occupation with statistics, and there are those that we cannot measure. Part of the damage is on the heritage, the Palestinian Christian heritage. For example, ancient processions that used to take place, say, from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, are now met with the annexation wall and a checkpoint. So people can't really continue this tradition and take part in it. These are traditions that date back to centuries. The damage that the occupation has done on our ancient traditions and heritage is not something that's highlighted enough.
And in order to get to the Holy Sepulchre, you're saying you're subject to violence, threats, intimidation?
Absolutely. Attacks, like physical attacks.
Attacks from the police or the settlers, you're saying?
From the police. The settlers is another story. The hate crimes are on the rise by the settlers in Jerusalem and in other places on both sides of the Green Line. If the settlers identify you as a Christian pilgrim, you'll be spat on.
And so Benjamin Netanyahu stood up in the United Nations a few weeks ago and said that Israel is the only country in the Middle East which protects Christians.
Teach their children to hate Jews and destroy the Jewish state. And Christians don't fare much better. When Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, was under Israeli control, 80% of its residents were Christians. But since the PA took control, that number has dwindled to under 20%. These are the people you want to give a state to? What you're doing is giving the ultimate reward to intolerant fanatics who perpetrated and supported the October 7th massacre.
just been telling me that your life is being made a total misery by the Israeli state. I mean, what's going on there?
Absolutely. I mean, I am amazed. I was amazed to see how he can mount on a podium at the UN and say such a shameless lie. We know the reason why our ancient presence as indigenous people to this land is basically threatened, and it's because of the Israeli occupation. We have seen our family members emigrate one after the other, and I'm careful when I say the word emigrate, because really they're responding to a deliberately made coercive environment by the Israeli occupation. It's not immigration gives this sense of choice. If you are living in a setting where there is no dignity, no safety, no freedom, no rights.
Where are we going now?
Now we're going to the Makhrur Valley, an equally important area as Kremizan. It's the other side of the valley, practically. It's also part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it's under also imminent threats of annexation under slightly different pretexts. That's a bypass road. It's what Israelis call a bypass road because you bypass Palestinians. You don't have to see them or interact with them.
Are Palestinians allowed on that road?
No, these bypass roads are made basically and essentially to serve the connectivity of the settlements and the settlers, although they are built and expanded on Palestinian lands. The dirt, if you see a dirt road, normally in Area C, this is allocated for the use of Palestinians because we cannot pave our own roads in Area C.
That's illegal.
It will receive a demolition order. And the way the settlements here are marketed is that you can live in the beautiful nature in proximity to Jerusalem and have an easy commute to your work, your job in Jerusalem. So here you can see not only are settlements surrounding the area, they are also started to be planted in the heart of the area, and there's a settler there who is farming with volunteers. He makes himself present a lot. He's roaming around, and it's very worrying. Add to that the settlers evicted the same family from their land forcefully last year without court orders, without nothing, and currently the case is ongoing before the Israeli judiciary. The latest data we collected from the Beit Jala municipality shows us that around 91.5% of the ownership of the lands in this valley belongs to Palestinian Christians. So just like Remizan, this area is very much tied into Palestinian Christian presence and history. These are areas where Palestinian Christians have existed and worshipped for centuries. It has a huge development potential that we are unable and deprived of using. And there is a right to development. You have the right to development as people. We can't have it. So you see, with loss of land, it's not only the loss of livelihoods. It's really it's the destruction of your future presence in your ancestral land as an indigenous person. If you look at the overall situation, again, people are deprived from their basic fundamental human rights. The overall situation is a situation where there's no dignity, no safety, no freedom, no equality. And then the environment is getting even more coercive by the day. For example, Bethlehem holds the highest number of movement restrictions in all of the governorates in the West Bank. The southern parts is where you have daily aggressive settler violence that's literally driving people outside of their homes. The western parts, where we just were in the Kremizan and Makhrur and the entirety of these areas, you can see the vicious settlement expansion in the area and the settler movements there. So if you look at the global picture of Bethlehem, you can see that it's being suffocated. And the result of the intensified Israeli policies in Bethlehem is less and less indigenous Palestinian Christians in the birthplace of Jesus Christ.
So what's happening here in Bethlehem, though, is part of a much broader pattern, isn't it? It's, spent a lot of time recently in Jerusalem, where you can see that worshippers are being attacked, spat at. There's an awful lot of offensive material being stuck up on walls. The Israeli police feel empowered to walk in and out of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And parallel with that, as part of a attack on freedom of religion, you can see the cynical assaults on the status quo, which protects freedom of religion.
Can be observed on both sides of the Green Line. If you look at what is going on with Palestinian Christianity on both sides of the Green Line, because let's remember, many of the Nakba survivors are also Palestinian Christians who have also become now citizens of Israel. Before the Nakba, the concentration of Palestinian Christians was up north in the Galilee. We used to compose anywhere between 10 to 12% of the Palestinian population back in the time. But then after the Nakba, immediately many
those villages up there, but they were erased, weren't they?
Ethnically cleansed, and many of them became refugees. So if you look at what's going on with them inside Israel now, I mean, as Palestinians, there's systematic discrimination against them. 56 laws discriminate against them just for being Palestinian, but also there's the discrimination on them being Christians, like, for example, the funding of Christian schools. Add to that a very also coercive environment for them overall as Palestinians inside the state of Israel. If you look at Jerusalem, there are multiple attempts to tax the church retroactively, contrary to the status quo that's centuries old, in a way that would be prohibitive for the churches to continue serving their communities there. Add to that the rise of the hate crimes, the attacks on churches, which are also inside the Green Line.
Gaza, of course, is where the Holy Family walked on their way to Egypt, isn't it?
Gaza is one of the most, it's an ancient city. It's full of history. It's like, I cannot put in words the loss that Gaza is to us as Palestinians. I mean, beyond the tragic loss of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, the loss, we lost an ancient Palestinian city full of history. Nothing can compensate that.
What did you pray about? We lit candles. What were you praying about?
Honestly, justice and peace in my homeland.